you so much for coming. And Brett Bixler is with us. He's going to present on gamification. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Brett, and you can share your screen whenever you're ready.
Okie doke. I just turned my video on so you know I'm really here, but I'm going to turn it back off to conserve bandwidth. Okie doke. So thanks for having me, everyone, today. And I'm really happy to be here, and I'm happy to see you, even though it's virtual. I always look forward to this time of the year because I get to see people that I otherwise don't ever see. So I'm going to talk today about games, game-like elements in Canvas. For those of you that have known me for a really long time, welcome back. For those of you that have never met me before, I've been here forever, I think since 1984. I've always been an instructional designer. I've held various positions in various units. Currently, I'm with the e-learning design and innovation group in the Smeal College of Business. So this is a question that I have always wrestled with, and it's what makes instruction so compelling? Why do some people like to learn some things and not others? And that's really what led me down the path of taking a look at games and later on gamification elements. So today we'll talk a little bit about the gamification stuff. I've talked about that before, so I'm going to skim over that and concentrate a little bit more on games and things you can do in Canvas. So what the heck are games all about? There's a lot of skepticism about games. And there's even more skepticism in some courts about the term gamification, which is, I think, not a great term. So I always try to talk about it in terms of game-like elements, and that seems to be a more neutral term. So as long as we have skeptical cat up here who's looking very skeptical, just want to ask who either owns a cat or is owned by a cat. If you chat or a yes. I just want to check that out really quickly. Oh, you guys didn't think this was going to be interactive, did you? Olivia 3. Yep. Me, yes, yes. Some owned by a dog. I have a dog too. He owns me as well. Okay. Still floating in there. For those of you that answered, you give yourself a point. So write it down somewhere. We'll keep track of this, and there'll be a grand prize at the end. But give yourself a point, and just to get everything rolling here nice and evenly, even for those of you that didn't answer, give yourself a point as well. By the way, that's something in gamification or known as free lunch. I don't know if you remember the Oprah, and you get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car, that kind of, they call that free lunch. It's when you get something for nothing. So in terms of my cats, I take my dog out every morning. He does his business. He comes in. If he does good, he gets a treat. The cats who are just sitting there watching the whole thing, they get a treat too. So they get a free lunch. So the other thing I like to make really clear is that games are not gamification. So let's talk a little bit about what they are. So first of all, let's start out here. What the heck's going on here? This is, although this Dropbox might not have this exact same screen anymore, this at one point when you signed into Dropbox for the first time, you could get this and it would come up. So go ahead and type into chat if you would, what you think is going on here. And also, why would Dropbox do something like this? So I see tutorial, incentive to get more space, challenge list, items completed from Julie, Carolyn, checklist of things to do, motivation. Laura, you think it's too busy. Okay. So tasks to incentivize process. Yep, it's all of those things. Might be too busy. Then for some of you might look at it and say, what the heck, I don't like checklists. And that's fine. But this was really designed to do a couple of things. First of all, here's are the steps you really should do to make sure Dropbox is working for you. But they gamified it, so to speak, by adding little things like just little incentives like the word complete, which is feedback. And they're showing you a visible you know, reach the goal sort of thing that should fill in complete with blue on the left there. So, and you're getting a bonus there, you get 150 megabyte bonus. So these are all gamification elements that a number of places have adopted, not just in software, but even in grocery stores where you have your reward points and that sort of thing. So gamification is out there and it's being used in a lot of different contexts. And I think it has some value in education if it's approached properly. So let's keep going here. So here's a definition. I'm going to read these to you. But gamification is just simply taking a look at what games offer and how they work, and then extracting those elements out and then trying to use them in non-game like environments. So things like the free lunch, things like feedback, things like bonuses, and so on and so forth. So let's take a look. There's more than this of different elements. I've bolded the ones that I think are the most important for us to talk about today. That doesn't mean that any of them aren't really super important, but there are some like lottery, which is just a randomization thing that might be a little bit hard to achieve. Infinite gameplay, which is where you can play the games over and over and over because they vary themselves slightly each time you play them. That might be a little hard to do in education. So, but they're all there. So let's take a look at some of these. Points are probably the lowest common denominator. Just a running numerical value. You have a certain number of points that you need to reach to achieve some sort of goal, whether it's passing the course or whatever. So in the real world, you have shopping reward cards where you get a certain number of points. And in Canvas, you can use those in terms of leveling and bonuses. And we'll talk about all of those real quickly here. But points are probably the easiest thing to do in Canvas because you can assign point values to different assignments and tasks that people achieve. And then when they reach a certain threshold, you can either manually or automatically have something happen for them. So achievements, really they're a way to brag. They're a way to say, hey, I did something. So in the real world, you get job promotions. That's considered an achievement. In a game, a lot of times you earn a new skill and you get a certain number of points, or you reach a certain level, or you kill a certain boss. You get you acquire new power. In other words, one of the ways you can use that in Canvas is to give them access to new information. So we do this a lot. Most of you that are instructional designers that have worked with a faculty member that have locked modules down until something happens. It's usually an achievement. It could be simply that they've achieved the date that they need to open it up, but it could be that they finished something in the previous module and therefore they've achieved success and they can get access to new information. So achievements are really common in games, and they all do provide a level of motivation for some students. So bonuses, do more, get more. And you have salary bonuses in the real world, not at Penn State, but in the real world you do. In the game token or a card or something like that. And in Canvas, bonuses could be extra credit. You can give unexpected access to special information in Canvas if you want to. So, and I see I'm trying to keep up with chat here. I see that you think locking down, Olivia thinks that locking down modules until previous ones are completed are many times counterproductive. So about a little bit if we have time towards the end, because that's an interesting thought, and I don't totally disagree with you on that. I think all of these things I'm talking about today have to be used very carefully and not just thrown out there because they sound neat or the faculty like them. Levels, so levels are very common in games. Basically, you get a certain number of points or a certain number of achievements, and you go up in level. When you go up in level, you usually gain in powers and abilities in a game. So actions are a good example of that. And a way that you could use them in Canvas is to use levels to allow progression in a course. I saw something over a dozen years ago, a gentleman, I forget the exact college, it was up north, but he had it was kind of a media-based program where you started out as a copy editor in a reporter magazine simulation, and basically you worked your way up through levels to the point where you were actually tutoring other people in the course, because you could get to that level where you got so good. But most people were subscribing to be the, the editor-in-chief of the magazine, and levels that you went through from copy editor to reporter, reporter, and so on and so forth. So there are ways to use points and achievements and bonuses to set levels if you wanted to. So cascading nation theory is something you might not have heard about before, because I think it's misnamed, and I don't think it's a theory. Basically, what it says is that you want to match the level of the task difficulty, the current task, to the current ability of the student. That ties into Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, all that kind of good stuff. Basically, it says start simple and build complexity. A lot of times people confuse that with scaffolding, which is really providing support to the student so they can accomplish a task, which you remove over time. So those two aren't necessarily at odds with each other. I think they're complementary, but a lot of times people will say something about cascading information when they really mean scaffolding, or vice versa. So here's a couple examples. Start with simple tasks, and a lot of times in games that happens. You safe environment in which to explore your character, how they move around, what buttons you can push to do what, and then you move into the real game. So good use of Canvas is to use, I just got a unstable connection message, so if I blurp out here, bear with me, folks. So good use in Canvas, do a prerequisite task analysis to structure lessons and provide just-in-time help. What the heck does that mean? Well, let's take a look here. I'll show you an example. So progression, that ties to achievements like that, but the easiest thing you can do really is show progress bars for people so that they know that they're approaching a goal. That's extremely powerful. People see that, and once they get above about 25%, a lot of them reach, I call it the point of no return. There's other terms out there that escape me, but it basically means that you want to keep going. You want to keep pushing the button. You want to keep going and reach that goal. It's really tough in Canvas to add a course completion bar, unless the course is linear in nature. But if you do have it set so that students have to complete module 1 before module 2, and before, you can fake progress bars with simple graphics. If the course is nonlinear in nature, that's extremely difficult to do within Canvas itself. You could probably fake it using some sort of artificial structure that calculated things for you, but it would be tough for most of us to do that. So I wanted to show you, this is prerequisite task analysis, but it's also progressive implementation. So a prerequisite task analysis says, what's my goal? What do I achieve that? So for each of those, let's call those enabling tasks. What do I need to do to achieve each enabling task? By me, I mean the students. By you, I mean the students. So, and then what are the enabling tasks for that enabling task? And eventually you reach a point where you draw a dotted line and you say, underneath anything underneath the dotted line is considered a prerequisite. They're coming to the task or the course with that knowledge already there, so you don't have to worry about that. If you've never done one of these, it's really fascinating to do it, because it does enable you to break things down from the whole to the parts, but then you can start building back up by saying, okay, I'm going to start them out with the lowest level enabling tasks that I have, and have them build their skill set up to where they get to the bigger enabling tasks, until finally they accomplish all the enabling tasks that are listed here and they've reached the goal of the course. It's just a different way of deconstructing what a lot of times faculty will give you, which is kind of a gobbledygook of stuff they want to accomplish, and it enables you to structure it in a way so that you can actually build the course so students have a smooth progression and build their abilities. That's just good instructional design. It's also done a lot of times in gaming, and it is a gamification element. So feedback, we do that all the time. Games do it all the time. Most of the gamification elements I just talked about, they all provide feedback in one form or another, whether it's overt or covert. It's all there. Feedback is really super important. A lot of times games will start out and they really hook you and try to get you past that point of no return by giving you a lot of feedback and a lot of achievements, like in the first half hour of the game, and then they gradually back off on that, because by that time you're hooked and they know they can stretch the rewards out a little bit in the feedback. But feedback, preaching to the choir here, always a good thing. Students want to know what the heck they're doing, how they're doing well and how they're not doing so well. So I'll give you an example of deep gamification here. This was actually done by a fellow designer. It was a course on an introduction to new social technologies. And what she wanted to do is she wanted to add some game-like elements to it. So she made teams in the course. There were 5 rounds of play, and the team with the most points at the end won. I don't know what they won, whether it was an overt or covert reward, but the things they looked at, and you can tell it's a little bit dated, Google Docs, although we just talked about Google Docs, Second Life, the NMC Horizon Report, Gaming and Emerging Technologies. And she further did a little bit more there, where she said you can earn between 1 and 5 points for each thing, and here they are. It's kind of a rubric. You can take the survey once and add your code to the last question, or you can create a Google form with at least 3 different question types and send it to me. Again, is that task any different than what you might ask someone to do to begin with? No, but she wraps some gamification terminology and points around it and some achievements around it to try to incentivize the students in the course or that they more engaged, at least anecdotally. Okay, that's all I have in terms of gamification. I want to talk a little bit about games because I did promise I would talk about that as well. Okay, so this is another audience participation point here. What's your favorite game and why? I'll pause for just a second while you type all that in. Animal Crossing, F-Series, yep, world building, Final Fantasy, Scrabble, categories, terraforming, Jeopardy and Design Home, Settlers. I've heard about that. It sounds like a lot of people have told me about that lately. I did a guest lecture in a course in the College of Communication, and that was mentioned. The Sims, and my daughter loves The Sims for building. She's 30-some years old, so. Words with Friends, Minecraft, Builders. Okay, so I'm seeing a bunch of things here, and they're all over the board. And that doesn't mean that anything's right or wrong, but here's the thing I want to point out. Different people like different types of games. So if you're working with an instructor who says, I want to use game X and you really need to take a look at that game and deconstruct it a little bit to figure out if it will have at least a course-wide audience appeal, because it might turn out only 10% of the people in the course will like that type of game. And it's a little hard to know that, but I'll give you some clues here on things you can take a look at. But first of all, let's take a look at a definition. Okay, I'm not going to read that to you, but by about the time you get to the 3rd line, you're probably feeling this. So let me give you one that I think is a little bit easier to digest. So this came Mark Prince in 2001. I still think it's true. It's an educational game is designed for learning, and it's both play and fun, and it's melding everything together. And it's not to make a really good educational game. Games that are out there that are non-educational, they don't have to worry about the educational component. They don't have to worry about being factual. We do. And it makes it a lot tougher to create some. And I've been blessed to work with people across the university and design a number of games, and it's a very creative yet frustrating endeavor. So different types of dice games, I'm on that, but I'll let a link up there if you ever wanted to look and see what types of games are out there. simplicable.com /news/games. And you can go there and they'll tell you about all different types of games and what they're good for and how you can use them and so on. And so there's that. And there's pros and cons with using games. They can be highly motivating and engaging. They can foster problem solving. They can, if they're structured right, provide those optimally challenge activities where it's not too difficult, not too easy to do. But if you don't play games, and this is more for the instructors, students might not have an optimal experience. You have to play games to be able to use them well, I think. Sometimes games just don't fit. Games take time. A lot of games will trade all that experience and all that gratification that you get from achieving levels and bonuses. It takes time to do that. Creating games takes a lot of time and resources. And you might need high-end computers for some of the games, especially the 3D ones. So there's some pros and cons there. It's a mixed bag. Students always like when I do crosswords for terminology. Yeah, nothing wrong with that at all. For that low level, recognition and recall knowledge, I think crosswords and those simple types of games are great for that. So this is something I came up with, so take it with a grain of salt. But basically, if you look at the bottom there, virtual worlds are really were designed, either arbitrary or self-imposed or even no goals, which we don't like. We like to have our goals. And you move all the way up to where you have specific goals. A lot more games fall into that because most games are goal-oriented. And then you have different levels from abstract to realistic, where some action games are more abstract and role-playing games tend to be more realistic in terms of, certain affordances that you have as a character, that sort of thing. So take that with a grain of salt. But you can use this to kind of decide if somebody says, I want to use a virtual world to teach facts and concepts. Maybe, but maybe not. This is probably far more important than that, and I didn't come up with this. This was James Bartle. Let me see here if I can find the quote. Yeah, he wrote this in 1996, or not James, Richard Bartle. Richard Bartle is one of the first persons that came out with one of the first text-based adventure games back in the 70s. But he wrote this article, and it's titled Hearts, Clubs, Diamonds, and Spades. So if you look that up and you look up Bartle, B-A-R-T-L-E, you'll find it. It's an interesting read. But he basically says there's 4 different player types. You have the killers, which are acting on players or acting on the game. A lot of times killers manipulate the environment to their advantage. And if that means killing other players, it does. If it means discovering hidden cheat codes, it does, that sort of thing. Across from them, you have the achievers. Those are the people that say, there's 20 goals in this game. I want to get every one of them. I want to get every trophy I can. You have the socializers who play the game and like it, but they're there to also talk to other people. They love the chat feature games, and they'll end up talking about all sorts of non-game things because they're not really there to either kill, achieve, or explore. They're there to talk to people. Then finally, you have the explorers, who are the people that will ferret out the furthest corners of the realm, if it's a role-playing game, that will try to understand everything about the game, and then probably share it with other people because it's a bragging right. Hey, I found the mystic cave of doom that no one else found, that sort of thing. So those are the socializers, and explorers are people that are interacting, and the achievers are acting, and the killers are acting on other players, and so on. So keep these in mind, because in my opinion, a really, really good game has a balance between these 4 elements, or affordances for these 4 types of gamers. And that's tough to do. It is really tough to do to provide different things for all 4 different types of players. So let's play a game here. I want to show you a game that actually created this in Canvas, and I did it as an experiment and a thought process, and I wouldn't recommend you do it yourself because it doesn't work that great. I'll show you another one that works a little bit better. But here, so this is more of a text-based adventure game. It could have graphics. This is all done in Canvas. There's nothing added to it. There's no plugins or anything like that. So you're here at this mansion. Your mad uncle reached out to you. So let's go ahead and enter the mansion. And so far, still just using pages of information with one page to the other. So now I have here, I'm in the foyer and I have a chance to examine the foyer. So let me do that. Now, this is where I don't like it because the interface breaks down here, but I got to take this quiz. And so should I pull up a loose floorboard? Sure. Should I examine the ceiling? Why not? And the door is stuck but not locked. Do you want to use brute force to open it? I'll say, sure, I'm going to try to bust it down. So now that I've done that, I get some feedback. Hey, I pulled up the loose floorboard and I found a crumpled note with this mystical code in it. I better copy that down. So I didn't find anything special on the ceiling, and I did get the door open, so now I can go forward. And by the way, I just unlocked the next module by answering that question that way. So the living room was a mess. It does look like someone tried to open up a massive safe in the corner. So let's try to open the safe. So there's a code panel on the safe. I hope you found it earlier. Again, let's go in there. Let's submit it. And I found the code earlier. So now, and this is, I know you are waiting to see what happens, but the game's over. Sorry, that's as far as I got. So that's one type of game you can create. You can create this in Canvas. I wouldn't recommend it, just simply because Canvas gets in the way. Canvas wasn't designed for this, and it gets in the way. So let's take a look here at a couple of things. First of all, I'll show you another one, and I'll show you another technology that you can use. And I think it's pretty easy to use, but you might disagree with that. But I want to point out one thing. Regardless of what game you bring to Canvas, whether it's crosswords or whatever, you build something yourself, more important, equally as important as the game itself, is the debriefing process that the instructor or you or the instructor and you together go through after the game is played with the students. So, and these are questions you can ask. Okay, what happened? You can learn a lot by just asking them that question. This is important too. Games have an affective component. They do reach out to our emotions. And it's important to know how people felt about what happened and why they felt that way. If it's a team-based thing, hey, how did others feel? What did you observe in? Were they frustrated? Were they happy? And why did you do what you did? That's important to know too, not only for you to improve on the game, but to figure out what they were thinking and what their thought process was. It helps expose both correct and incorrect thought patterns. So comparing it to the real world, everyday routine, you can ask that. And how could you employ this in your real world work? Would what you learned here, would that help? Looking for transfer here, folks. And again, of course, what was good and bad about the game. So you can ask those. It's important to ask those. And I know I'm running out of time here, so I want to just keep going. But here's the things that I did. You can lock the modules, require that they be unlocked at a certain point. And you don't have to use the game that I just showed you there. You can just do this in general. You can tech quizzes and make them earn make them earn the password. You can have them require discussion posts to see other posts, even yours, and you can set file availability so certain files are locked or unlocked for them depending on the circumstances that they provide or they have to earn that kind of stuff. So you have all that you can do in Canvas. So Canvas is not great in and of itself to bring games in, but you can bring them in from the outside. Somebody had mentioned earlier about things like crosswords and things like that. Those are great for low-level knowledge, right? Things that people need to either recognize or recall. That's at the lower end of the cognitive spectrum. That's great. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. If you're looking for something a little bit more that you can build, without kill. There is something out there called interactive fiction. They used to be called text-based adventure games, and there are some editors out there that will let you do just text, but also let you add images and hyperlinks and that sort of thing. So I've listed those there. Squiffy is one, Twine is another. Textadventures.com lets you build things in kind of a WYSIWYG format. Adrift and Inform are also out there, but just to get good at those. But I want to show you Squiffy. So Squiffy came out relatively recently, and I think it's pretty cool. So here I just pulled this up. This one is on Julius Caesar, and here I am. I'm returning from Spain. And which way do I go? Left, right, or forward? Well, I let us into the city. People are cheering. I can go take a look at a home. So this one, I didn't get that far into it. I don't think this has any images in it, but you can put images in if you wanted to. So anyway, this thing is not that hard to build. It does require a text-based editor, and you have to put brackets around certain things to get commands to work. But in terms of having to know things like C++ or that, no, you don't need any of that. So it's a lot better in that regard. So yeah, it reminds me of Zork. Yep, the Great Underground Empire. For those of you that don't know what Zork is, it was one of the first really commercially successful text-based adventure games that came out in the 80s. Okay, so I'm out of time. Questions, thoughts? I know we started a little late, so hopefully we have time for a few questions.
I just see one question was posted. Rob said, I'm wondering if there's a way to embed Easter eggs in required readings or videos that makes it fun for students to show that they actually viewed these materials. I'm looking for non-punitive ways to encourage students to keep up to date.
So I took a gamification course, oh geez, probably 7 or 8 years ago. Kevin, I can't remember his last name, but he was from University of Pennsylvania, and he would start out each week with a different video, and it was always in his office, but he would change things. He had a shelf behind him, and he had a whole bunch of books and different things on that, changing things around on the shelf, and he would put his Easter eggs up there. And so for the people that caught on to that, they started noticing certain patterns in the way he arranged things, or even the things he put up themselves. I thought that was pretty slick. So yeah, there are absolutely ways of doing that, either through video or even with even interactive stories that are related to the course content. I've experimented a number of times with that to try to use the hero's journey. So the students are reading the hero's journey, not all at once, but for each module they get a certain chapter of this overall story. And there's ways of doing that and putting Easter eggs in there through hyperlinks or whatever that can open up things or lead them to sites they might not know about otherwise. So absolutely. Yep, you can do them in Kaltura. With quizzes, even with the non-quiz pages, or even Kaltura quizzes could be a way of doing it.
And Brett, before we let you go, Carolyn asked if you can please share the PowerPoint if possible. A lot was covered, and she'd like to review without waiting for the session to be posted on the TLT site. So maybe, Carolyn, you can reach out to Brett's email is posted on the screen right now. So maybe if you just reach out to him, he can send that to you and anybody else who also wants it.
Yep, anybody that wants it is happy to have it. So
yeah, thank you so much for teaching us about gamification today. I think we all really enjoyed it. So thank you everyone for attending our Canvas Day session, and we'll see everybody next week.
All right, thanks. I'll stop sharing.